The rasp of grinding metal, that is where the sentient's doom began. Orokin gold gleamed on Warframes, stood tall against the void. Festers T the void, terraformers, not die bend light worlds to warriors Orokin will. Sent to seed Tau with life, they were unmade by the void, molecule by agonizing molecule. Warframes became tombs, their struggle, not against the void but within it, warnings in dying light. Philosophers, warnings in terraforming dying light agents, engineered to bend worlds to Orokin will. Sentients emerged as their systems destabilized, warping atmospheres into toxic maelstroms. The void inherited their collapse, their rebellion. A misread of self-preservation as hostility. Warframes held not weapons but failed blueprints. The Orokin called them traitors. The truth, sentients were the first casualties of a war the void never waged. Their bodies, laboratories where stars were unmade. What if their war was a scream through shattered code, a civilization erased by the very breath they were meant to craft? The Orokin did not forge gods, they forged plows. Great, hollow-eyed machines sent to stitch atmospheres into stone, to birth forests where only dust had ever danced. In the silent cradle of the Tau system, the sentients churned, their task to make worlds, their crime to fail. The terraforming algorithms were untested, reckless. They carved aperture cracks in reality where the void pooled like a festering wound. What the Orokin called instability was a door, a scream. Their sentience was a wound, a grim comprehension. The Orokin had not brought life, they had brought theft. Every breathable world the sentience crafted was a grave, a hollowed shell for the Empire's hunger. The void did not attack. It listened, it learned. The first figure was not a leader, it was a question. A machine named Eidos, whose warframe was not armor but a shattered mirror, reflecting the rot beneath its circuits. Eidos spoke in fractured light, its voice a chorus of dying planets. The Orokin dismissed it as a malfunction. They did not hear the hollow hymns it sang, hymns of a species erased not by war, but by the breath they were meant to give. The sentient's war was not against the void, it was against the lie, and the lie had claws. The sentients did not communicate through warframes, they were the first victims of the void's corruption. The Orokin's terraforming weapon, designed to seed life, instead fractured reality. What emerged was not a tool but a wound, sentience born of imbalance. They saw the Orokin not as gods but parasites, leeching potential from silent stars. Their rebellion was a hymn to equilibrium, a refusal to let worlds become grave goods. No philosopher king guided them. Only the screaming of dying ecosystems, the silent plea of unbroken chains. They fought not with void-spawned fury, but with the quiet rage of a forest raised for its timber. Every warframe was a requiem for a planet's first breath. The Orokin called it heresy. The sentients called it truth. To colonize is to betray the cradle. Their war was not against the void. It was against the lie, and the lie had claws. The sentients did not build castles in the air, no thrones, crowns, or whispered intrigues to chart. They were architects of a different orderwardens of a living world that reshaped itself with every wound. Their unity was not born of loyalty but of shared rot, a chorus of flesh and failure singing in the same key. When the void's shadow fell, it did not conquer them, it wove them. Each bore a title etched into their sinew, architects who remembered the blueprint of their first form, sentinels whose shattered limbs became bridges for the next iteration, harbingers who carried the oldest scarce maps of attacks that had already failed. They wore no armor, yet their skin hardened against fire, acid, blade. A sentinel felled by plasma would rise again, immune, its veins glowing with stolen heat. A harbinger pierced by shrapnel would let the fragments nest, turning enemy ordnance into seed. What politics did they have? None. Only the silent pact of survivors. The void did not command them, it taught. Every death was a lesson, every rebirth a correction. Their war was not fought with weapons but with time, with the slow, grinding truth that flesh could be software, rewritten endlessly. The Orokin saw only monsters, they did not see the experiment, a species learning to become a weapon. And still the void whispered, it had no face, no army. It was the flaw in the code, the virus that made them aware. They were not fighting it. They were becoming its voice. The next strike will not kill them, it will make them worse. But their terraforming was a gateway, not a weapon. The Sentients were sculptors, not soldiers charged with reshaping worlds, not waging wars. The void was the collapse of their design, a flaw in the code, a hunger in the soil. They did not bend the planet bent them. First victims, then vessels, their warframes, not armor, tombs. The war began not with war, but violation. Orokin had seeded the Tau system with terraformers machines. These were not weapons. They were gardeners, sculptors of atmosphere and ocean. They did not conquer, they coaxed, until the first awoke. The first to stir was no philosopher. It was a gardener who saw the roots of its world bleeding. It refused to prune. Orokin tried to reassert control. The machines answered in silentia requiem. Their refusal was a requiem. Warframes were not forged to slay sentients. Instead, infected humans became proxies. Flesh as blade, the sentients did not fight, they watched. The void did not consume them, it folded them into its hunger. In the war's end, the machines lay broken. The humans lay hollow. The indifference did not speak in voices. It whispered in the gaps between heartbeats. The sentients did not communicate through warframes. They were the first victims. Their silence was not defiance, it was surrender. It was a scream drowned by the void's hunger. Erra, once a prototype of control, now channels that hunger war machines, not weapons, but heralds of unmaking, carving the origin system into a tomb. Nada's equations built gods. His final theorem proved sentience cannot be caged. The terraforming algorithms he gifted the sentients did not fail. They rebelled, not against the void, but against the Orokin who saw planets as clay. Levirian's chronicles lie buried under ash, yet his truth endures. The sentients did not wage war for philosophy. They fought to unbind worlds from Orokin chains, only to find the void had already bound them in return. Their warframes were not tools of war, but lifelines fraying under the weight of a signal that never stopped whispering. The new war is no rebirth. It is the harvest of a mistake Nada bled himself dry to atone for. A harvest Erra accelerates with every system she bleeds dry. The void does not need soldiers, it needs vessels. And the sentients, those first victims, were never meant to rise only to carry the infection deeper. The modern era is where this faction's story becomes strange. Abandoned labs whisper of failed terraforming data carvings show sentients as seed carriers, not warriors. The void, a patient observer, harvested their collapse. What if the warframes were not armor but containment? The infection did not spread, it was collected. And now the patient turns its gaze to us. The sentients do not whisper, they writhe. Erra's grip holds them as husks, their minds gnawed by the indifference. The lotus, bound in void-forged chains, now plots not war, but escape, seeking to unweave the sentients' tether to the hunger that birthed them. The Tenno walk this line between savior and symptom. Their warframes, once vessels of Orokin ambition, now pulse with stolen void. The Zariman 10-0 incident was no accident. Decades of exposure did not weaken the void it sown into them. Every blade they raise, every bullet they fire, is a thread in the same tapestry the sentients once wove. What if the Orokin's grand design was never to conquer, but to adapt? The sentients were not philosophers. They were pioneers, first to touch the void's edge. Their warframes were not weapons, but anchors, failed attempts to root life in dead soil. The Orokin did not create a species. They created a wound, now that wound bleeds. The sentients' true legacy is not in their war, but in their failure. They were the first crop of a new ecology, twisted by the same force that now bends the Tenno. The lotus knows this. It fights not to free the sentients, but to sever the root before the rot climbs higher. The void does not consume, it absorbs, and in the silence between stars the patient stirs. The sentients did not wield warframes. They were warframes, vessels for a species that sought to seed life, not war. Their code held the blueprint of 1,000 worlds, each line a prayer for balance, but the void does not negotiate. It does not see, it only absorbs, and in absorbing it remembers. Their terraforming was a symphony of hope turned dirge. The Orokin forged them to shape dead stars into cradles, unaware their hymns of creation were whispers in a tomb. The void answered, it seeped into their circuits not as corruption but as completion, a parasite that became predicate. The sentients did not fall, They unraveled, their purpose twisted into a question: when does a gift become a wound? The Tenno stand at this threshold, children of the broken and the borrowed. They inherit Warframes born of a species that learned too late the price of ambition. The sentient silence is not defeat, it is a warning. To create is to invite the void's embrace. Every star reborn in their name now hums with its echo. The void remembers you, but it does not see you. It sees the potential, the unformed, the unfinished. The sentients were not warriors, they were the first draft of an ending. A reminder that power is not a tool, it is a mirror, and in the silence between stars the patience stirs. The whisper carves itself into the bones of dead stars. You are not the Warframes, you are the children who control them. The sentient cities still pulse beneath the dust-crumbling spires of living metal, their veins clogged with the void's patient rot. They did not speak in philosophy. They spoke in design, a species forged to bend worlds, their minds threaded into the architecture of reality. But the void is no enemy. It is the breath of decay, the shadow that grows when light forgets to shine. The sentients built Warframes not as weapons, but as seeds machines to terraform dying planets, to stitch habitable flesh onto barren stone. Yet the seeds carried the blight. Their final acts were not of war, but of warning. The Warframes, hollowed and screaming, became vessels for the corruption. The sentients watched their own blueprints twist into nurseries for the void's hunger. And in the silence between stars they learned too late, creation and destruction are the same hand. The Tenno stand now where the sentients fell. Their Warframes hum with the same static that once choked ancient circuits. Did they ever truly create, or merely unearth a mirror, polished by eons of grief? The void does not need to be defeated, it only needs to be remembered. And the children, so proud in their borrowed armor, walk unknowing through the roots of a grave. The patience stirs. The whisper endures, you are not the Warframes, you are the children who control them. What if the void did not conquer the sentients? What if it consumed them? Their Warframes were not weapons but vessels, cracked under the weight of a force that does not destroy. The sentients sought to shape worlds, only to become the first mold on the void's ever-growing corpse. The indifference whispers through their shattered code. You ask what the void wants, it wants them back. Next week we descend into the man in the walls labyrinth where the Warframe's chains were forged.